Hans, thank you very much, and thank you all. I'm stunned at the size of the audience that OU and the Center for Quality Communities has, Institute of Quality Communities has garnered here. So congratulations, all of you and the participants, and you for coming. I'm going to talk in my little niche of the world about economics and historic preservation, but that's not usually how we've thought about historic preservation. People who've become preservation advocates for reasons, for cultural reasons, or educational reasons, or social reasons, or aesthetic reasons, and many other of the values that our historic built resources have. But in more recent years, there's been an expectation that, in fact, preservation has to demonstrate an economic value as well. And so what I'm going to give you this morning is really how that takes place and some factoids from a dozen or so studies around the country in different areas of economic impact of historic preservation. And while there's lots of them, the kind of big measurables are these: the jobs and household income created simply by the process of rehabilitating historic buildings, the impact of historic districts on property values, the incremental difference of heritage tourism over tourism in general, the environmental impact, a new study area in historic preservation, the social impacts, the role of historic preservation in downtown revitalization, and then this broad issue of economic competitiveness. I'll start with jobs. There's been in tax law in the U.S. Since 1976 and altered some over the years since that, but there's been a federal rehabilitation tax credit program reward for appropriately rehabilitating historic buildings. And over the 30-year period, a little over 30-year period between 1978 and 2011, that has cost the taxpayers, through what's called a tax expenditure, it's cost about $19 billion in credits have been giving out to people who've done historic preservation projects. Those projects, however, have been responsible for the creation of $2.2 million jobs, and if you take the first number and divide it by the second, cost per job, $8,900. The stimulus program had to have it. Republicans were wrong to say we didn't have it. Democrats were wrong in what they spent it on, but using the White House's numbers, and I'm not making villains out of anybody, $878 billion. So those of you who are in graduate school today, you will be spending the rest of your lifetime paying off the bills of that stimulus program, right or wrong. Jobs identified by the White House as having been saved or created, 3.6 million. Cost per job, $244,000. I want one of those jobs. So where is the effective use of scarce resources? It's the first. David Listigan at Rutgers University has done the analysis of this over time, and he starts out with this, saying, all right, this cost the taxpayers $19.2 billion to have people fixing up old buildings, but that program generated revenues back into the federal government of $24.4 billion. How many federal government programs, in fact, generate more revenue for the federal government than cost the federal government? The answer to that question is damn few, and this is one of them. We did a study a couple years ago in Georgia about how historic preservation activity in Georgia has created jobs, but also how it measures against other kinds of economic activity in the state of Georgia. Ellen's friends and taxpayers in Georgia just spent a few years ago a couple $zillion attracting an automobile manufacturer. They're fine, they can do it, it's their money. But $1 million worth of automobile production in the state of Georgia creates 3.5 jobs in the state of Georgia. Air transportation, many of you have had to fly through Atlanta Airport, one of the busiest in the world, but $1 million worth of air transportation expenditures, those plane tickets, $1 million with those creates 8.7 jobs in the state of Georgia. Rehabilitate an historic building in the state of Georgia for $1 million, what does that create? 18.1 jobs. Where's the real economic development? We heard about property values a minute ago, and I want to come back to that. But the second broad area of preservation's economic impact is the role of local historic districts on property values. Dubuque, Iowa, that's really one of the cutting-edge cities in terms of comprehensive sustainable development in America, looked a few years ago at property values. Historic rehabilitation property values up 51%. The historic properties next door to those projects up 9.5%. All of the properties went up 5%, but the non-historic properties in downtown Dubuque up 3.5%. Great study done by a econometric modeling firm in Philadelphia, looked at the properties in National Register districts in the city of Philadelphia over a 30-year period, and found that properties within National Register historic districts outpaced the value as a whole at about 14.3%, but those in local districts that were regulated, that has rules and regulations, which the National Register districts do not, in fact commanded a price premium of 22.5%. Now I know some of you probably serve as staff or are members of local preservation commissions, and I hate to break your heart, people are not paying a premium for the right to go and appear before your goofy preservation commission. They're paying the premium for the confidence that the lunatic across the street can't be doing something to his house that's going to have an adverse impact on your house. I'd also point out, it's a great, I learned a lot in Chris's presentation, and he cited these great two neighborhoods that are creating close-in neighborhoods, one in Columbus and one in Denver. They're creating a price premium. He didn't mention those are both historic neighborhoods. It's not an accident. We want to talk about walkable urban places where that's already there, in fact, is in historic neighborhoods. One of the great studies, in fact, another active new urbanist, John Gilderblum at the University of Louisville, looked at all of the neighborhoods in the city of Louisville, and looked at on a linear regression basis. So he sorted out all the variables where there was only one variable left, and that was it in or was it not in a local historic district? And what he found is those that were in the local historic district sold for a premium of between $59,000 and $67,000 and were appreciated 21% more than the rest of the market. Again, it's a little bit counterintuitive. You might hear saying, oh, if there's more regulations, that's going to adversely affect property values. In fact, study after study after study in all places, different methodologies all over the country. In fact, it's the other way around. It is that protection of the context that's creating the economic premium. But of course, those are good economic years. What about downturns? We've been in real estate economic chaos since 2007. So a student of mine at Penn looked at comparable neighborhoods in the city of Philadelphia over a 12-month period in the midst of this real estate chaos. Took 6 historic districts and looked at comparable neighborhoods, usually side by side, but that were not local historic districts. Similar building stock, similar economics, similar demographics. And what did she learn? That in fact the foreclosure rate was half in the local historic districts than it was in the comparable neighborhoods. Now, I'd like to say, well, that's because people who live in historic neighborhoods or never lose their jobs or get a divorce or get in financial trouble. That's not it. The issue is, if I get in financial trouble because the market is more stable, I can get rid of that house before it goes into foreclosure. Well, you know, you graduate students sometimes think that the professors are here to teach you. I'll tell you, at Penn, I learn more from my students than they ever learned from me. And I like this methodology so much, took it to Connecticut, where we did a study of local historic districts in 4 cities around and found virtually the same answer. That in some of these are very rich places, some of those are real struggling places, but the rate of foreclosure in local historic districts was half of what it was in the rest of the community. The third area is the role of historic preservation in heritage tourism. Now, my goal in life is to break this automatic assumption of if you're talking about historic preservation economics, you must be talking about heritage tourism. Well, there's lots of contributors other than that, but it does have a pattern that visitors stay longer, they visit more places, and they spend more per day heritage tourists than other kinds of tourists. International visitors coming to the U.S., 2.6 million more went to an historic place than went to Disneyland kind of places. 4 times as many went to a historic place than went to a casino. 14 times more people went to international visitors went to an historic place than played golf. In Georgia, the study that Georgia, huge tourism industry, but just the heritage portion of the tourism industry in Georgia is 117,000 jobs and $204 million in salaries and wages. Civil War battlefields found that, okay, people are going to the Civil War battlefield, there's not much to spend money on there, but they're having a huge impact on those local economies, 21 million in state taxes and 12 million in local revenues. $5 visitors per visitor goes to the state tax revenues. When we have state government struggling on how to pay the bills, we ought to look at what generates those, and heritage tourism is one of those. And then this newer area of kind of research of the connection between historic buildings and the environment. And here's a building in downtown Hartford, Connecticut. Okay, it's a nice building. 410 Asylum Street, and a developer owned the building, and he went and applied for a demolition permit. And the city turned him down. And he said, okay, I'm going to thumb my nose at you. I'm going to give the stupid building away to somebody who's going to create low-income housing and see how you like to have a bunch of poor people in your downtown. So they did. Gave it to an enlightened, nonprofit, low-income housing developer. They took and they redeveloped this property, got historic rehabilitation tax credits, also got low-income housing tax credits, also, by the way, got LEED certification. And it is 100% full. It's about half market and half low-income, undistinguishable units, and both lists have waiting lists. But we said, all right, forget that. What if the city had said, go ahead, tear down the stupid building? What would that have meant? Well, the energy that's already into that building, embodied energy, is 616,000 gallons of gasoline. 10,000 gallons of gasoline just to haul the crap away to the landfill. Just the debris from tearing down that one building would have been equivalent to 21 days of all of the trash generated by all the people who live in Hartford, Connecticut. And my little favorite factoid, we all save those aluminum cans because the environmentalists say it's good for the environment to do it. The debris, the embodied energy, the throwing away of that one building would have had a landfill impact of the last 21 million of those aluminum cans that those good citizens of Hartford, sorted every Friday. Excellent study by an investment analyst and environmental economist in the state of Maryland, looked at the relative difference between infrastructure costs for the public sector in terms of redeveloping historic buildings or building out at the edge, 50 to 80% of cheaper infrastructure costs. The Tea Party and the Sierra Club ought to be leading the historic preservation parade. The U.S. National Trust has set up a Green Lab to kind of look systematically on peer-reviewed engineering basis at what is the environmental impact of using those historic buildings. What they found is you can put all the waterless toilets and solar panels you want to on some new razzle-dazzle gold star building. But in fact, it takes 10 to 80 years of energy savings of an energy-efficient new building to make up for the negative climate change impact of the construction as compared to keeping those historic buildings in place. In fact, almost every category of building reuse, there's environmental savings over razzle-dazzle new green gizmo things. Mayor Bloomberg in New York decided he really wanted to make New York an energy-efficient city, and so they commissioned an audit of thousands of buildings in New York. This was not a preservation initiative. This was how do we save energy initiative. And in fact, where were the buildings with the greatest energy efficiency? It wasn't some razzle-dazzle new building. In fact, it were the buildings built prior to 1930. And then they used kind of newer metrics in the Energy Star system for office buildings, and the same results. The one, in fact, the highest scores were not the new razzle-dazzle stuff. It was the pre-1930 buildings in New York. But, by the way, some of you who think that this is a good idea in some kind of absurd obsession of density at all costs, saving 4 inches of brick and throwing away the building, like keeping the Halloween mask and throwing away the person, facotomies. It has a negative environmental impact. It has a negative, none of the economic benefits I talk about is true in this, and not in a dictionary written by Salvador Dali on drugs does this constitute historic preservation. Social impacts. Sometimes we think about historic preservation as saving mansions and rich dead white guys, and it's fine. But in fact, in Rhode Island, under their state tax credit, they were creating low-income housing in historic buildings. When we looked in Connecticut, that 95% of the tax credit projects weren't in the rich neighborhoods in suburban New York, Connecticut. In fact, they were neighborhoods that had been dying for investment, sometimes for 2 and 3 generations. In fact, 95% of all of the investment was in areas of very modest household incomes. And then this issue about downtown revitalization. And of course, many of you are from Oklahoma Main Street communities, and Oklahoma has one of the great Main Street programs in America. But on a national level, over the last 31 years, in those Main Street communities around the country, $56 billion invested in physical improvements, 110,000 net new businesses, 475,000 net new jobs, 236 building rehabilitation projects, cost per job created, about $2,400. And the leverage nationally of that program, 18 to 1. This is place management. Place management was happening in Main Street communities now for 30 years before anybody else decided that was a good phrase to use. Oklahoma studied just a few years ago about Oklahoma Main Street programs, created 24,500 jobs. 1.5% of the whole workforce, non-ag workforce in the state is from those, couple dozen downtown Main Street programs in Oklahoma. It's going to be a long time before Hooker, Oklahoma gets 130,000 people to support a walkable living area. Historic downtowns, historic commercial districts, and historic neighborhoods are walkable already. In Iowa, we're just finishing a study in Iowa about a great program they've had there, Main Street program, for since 1986, and they've been very diligent about keeping records. And what they found is that just the net new businesses in those towns, not all the districts, not the whole towns, just the net new businesses in those Main Street communities, in fact, last year generated $43 million in state sales tax for a program that costs about $800,000 a year. So 50 times more revenue is coming from those new businesses in those Main Street communities that's costing the state. That's getting taxpayers' money. Added in 25 of the last 26 years, there's been an increase in net new jobs in spite of the farm crisis and 3 recessions over that time period. And every year, they've added net new businesses. And then this issue about economic competitiveness. John O'Brien was for years director of the direct foreign investment solicitation for Ireland. And in spite of its ups and downs in the recent Euro crisis, Dublin has been an extraordinary success story. And this is John's map of these international, high-tech, cutting-edge, 21st century, knowledge worker, creative class kind of businesses that have migrated to Dublin. And here's why John says it was. He's no big historic preservation guy, but he said, first of all, they came because of the workers. We had the workers there, and the jobs followed the workers, but the jobs followed the workers because the workers went there first. And they went there first because the quality of life that Dublin provided and that the historic context of Dublin was a huge component of that quality of life characteristic. Now, some of these great international high-tech firms are in historic buildings, some of them are across the street, some of them are at the edge, doesn't matter. They went there to get the workers, and the workers went there on exactly what Chris was talking about the quality that that place is providing. Earlier this year, or I guess late last year, the World Bank issued a new book called The Economics of Uniqueness, recognizing the role of historic preservation in creating economies. And I don't know how many of you have watched the World Bank over the years, but when they have moved to a point today where they say this is a center economic development strategy, lots and lots have happened. With that, I'll shut up. Thank you all very much.